Hi, Ted. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you for joining me. And we'll start by talking about this brilliant book that you've written with Hamish McBain.
Yeah,
It's a sort of song by song Oasis book, a brilliant book as well,
great.
with like stories behind the songs, and it gives you like a history of the band as well. When did you
Yeah.
start writing the book?
We went to see Liam Gallagher play at the O2 in London for the definitely maybe anniversary shows. And it was sort of, I didn't know he was going. I sort of know Hamish. I know him a bit. I didn't know him that well. I mean, I sort of see him out and about and we have a chat always. I always get on with him, but we never worked together or anything. But I saw him in the pub before the gig near the O2 and we were just chatting about how many young people were there, and it's like blowing our minds because he was saying on the tube on the way to the show there were all these teenagers singing like quite low key Oasis songs on the train, and we were saying, yeah, well, look, there's got to be a generation of people who are fans of Oasis who you may well be. This may be well apply to you actually thinking about it. Who were not alive really when any of the records came out, or were very very young. And so they don't really have the backstories. And we were just saying it'd be really good to do something that puts the music in a context, and treats it seriously as we take it. And we started talking about this, and we were emailing each other and sort of texting each other, and had a couple of pints. It was sort of an excuse to do some socializing together about it. And then they went and bloody reunited, and that was, and so then we thought, oh, we've got to hurry up and do this thing because no one ever believes us when we said we were planning to do this anyway. And in many ways, I think commercially it might have been better for us to have done it 6 months earlier, before the thing, because now it just seems like opportunistic, but we weren't. Because our idea was basically just to provide a framework for the young Liam Gallagher fans who were going along and singing Oasis songs, and also to the older people too. But it was mainly just to provide this is the this definitive story of their music, and through the music do a kind of biography by stealth of the band and tell some stories and tell our own first person experiences of interviewing them because we're also I'm 10 years older than Hamish, and we come over from different angles. He was a teenager when Definitely Maybe came out, and he was a mad Oasis fan, and I was working at NME, so we know we have different perspectives on it. So that's that, and it kind of it works quite well. I think I'm happy with it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great book, and it's one of the. I like hearing stories behind the songs or how they came to be and what was happening at that moment and stuff. So it's right up my street, this book. Do you
Good.
enjoy that aspect of stuff as well?
Yeah, I mean, I used to work at Q, and we used to do a regular feature called The Story Behind the Song every month, and so you get someone to help describe how they wrote a song. So yeah, I think you know, as a balanced, healthy diet of music, reading and writing is an element, and there definitely, yeah. I mean, I prefer it. I prefer it. So, I mean, with Oasis, I find everything interesting with Oasis, and I always have done. I find the music really interesting. I find their personal relationships interesting. I find every quote they have ever said is funny and interesting. Everything about them is interesting to me. But I don't think there's been very much written about the music, or not enough written about how the music came to be. Um, and it all just ties in. Yeah, so I'm interested in that side of it, I suppose. But I think with Oasis, it's the whole package. I find the whole thing just brilliant and hilarious and interesting and whatever. Yeah, I'm totally on board. I'm an Oasis fan.
No, I
Yeah,
agree with you there. But
yeah,
and they always give great interviews as well, don't they? As you know.
yeah. They're world class. Definitely the world. I'd say the world undefeated champions of interviewing, not just across music. I think in any field, both. I mean, definitely as a pair, not together necessarily, but they both deliver something different in terms of quotes. And they're both just the best, and they can't be beaten.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
with Noel, he's always been like he never really tells the story of what the songs are about. So was it hard doing the research for the book?
He never, yeah, because often I don't think there is a story behind like the lyrics. Often the lyrics there might be the odd bit here and there, but I mean, when we say it's what the stories are, what the songs are about, it's more it's just more their context. So where they were when they were recording them, where they were in their history of the band at that time. It's not necessarily picking lyrics apart, although we do that a few bits and pieces here and there, because there's a few obvious examples, but um, mainly it's more about the story of the song rather than say that what a lyric's about, because I think often it's quite vague.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the research was basically just read every single interview they've ever done. And we've got quite a lot of interviews too that we've done with them, and just sort of putting all together and then working out what we want to say. But I mean, it was quite an easy book to do in some respects, because there was two of us and we just met up uh, last sort of October or November or something, and just wrote down all the songs. We had all the songs written down, and just went, "You do that one, you do that one," like just divided like that. So then once you knew what your songs were, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this half, you do that half, and I guess we just applied. We because we're both journalists, music journalists, we just sort of gave ourselves a deadline and said we've just got to do it. So we just had to do research on each song, and that worked.
I'm a massive Oasis fan, and I learned stuff in the book that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know the connection with George Best and where did it all go wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a very famous quote. So that's probably a generational thing. You see, like because it's funny you should say that, because the guy who was when you write a book, you write a book and you give it into the editor, and then the editor will do one quick edit, do like a kind of like a big publisher, then they give it to a copy editor who then goes through with like a fine eye over every single thing. Mainly, what I always expect them to do is to make sure we haven't repeated ourselves, haven't made any grammatical or spelling mistakes, or haven't libeled anyone. But often they overstep the mark slightly. And this guy, he said he went, "Oh, I think this is a tired old hackneyed story, the George Best one. Everyone knows that." And that's purely because he's older than me even. So he's an old guy. But you don't know that story probably. And so that's where it comes from. That where it all goes is the George Best story of the waiter who came to his hotel room when George Best was missing, and knocked on the door of his Spanish hotel with the paper that said, George Best missing in Spain. Man United desperately looking for him, and he knocks on the door, and there was George Best, topless with some with Miss World or some ex Miss World in bed, topless with him, and all the winnings from the night's casinos all over the room. And the waitress said, "Oh, Mr. Best, where did it all go wrong?" That it may not be true or not, but I guess apocryphal or not, it's still a great story. So yeah, that's where it all go wrong come from. So yeah, it's funny you should say that. It's gratifying to hear you say that, just because the guy tried to make me take it out. And I was like, no, I'm not taking it out. And also, this is above your pay grade, mate. I'm not taking. Yeah, so we decided it's staying in.
Is there, when you were doing the research for the book, were there things that you learned or took away from it?
Well, there's loads, and in fact, I'm just going to say, you interviewed Tony Griffiths, didn't you? It was on your pod.
Chris Griffiths.
Chris Griffiths, sorry, not Tony Griffiths, Chris Griffiths, yeah. So I learned stuff from that.
Oh,
He
really?
did like about oh God, enough. Can't remember the name of the bloody song.
Don't go away.
Yes, Don't Go Away, which about how he felt that I've got to be careful with my words here, that Noel had taken the song from him, taken the melody certainly. Um, and they're very similar, aren't they? And I hadn't actually noticed that, and I didn't know that. I mean, then afterwards, I went back through all the Reddit um, message boards and people discussing that on there. But that was the first place I heard was actually on your podcast was him describing it. So yeah, so how Noel had sort of helped himself to an old Real People song. But I think that Real People song hadn't really been released, had it? It came out much later.
Yeah,
So I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to prove that Noel would have nicked it. Sometimes it's just memory. Just you hear a little melody 10 years earlier, and then suddenly just you're playing it on your guitar, and you think you've written it. I think maybe that's possibly what happened there. I don't know, but it is very similar.
yeah, very, very similar. He's a brilliant songwriter, but it is well known, isn't it? That.
Yeah, but the only thing is that he always admits. I mean, no, he never goes. He never says, "Oh, I didn't nick this." He always says, "Yeah, obviously," but I've turned it into an Oasis song. So I think it's unlikely. I don't know. I don't know. But actually, he never really gave the credit to the real people, did he? There's the one group, so maybe a lot of it is just I don't know. Maybe a lot of it is you never know. It's he said, she said stuff like you kind of don't want to, you know, kind of don't want to get too involved in that because Noel does always admit when he's nicked stuff, always. So that's the one thing he's never really admitted to. So I'll leave
Yeah,
it.
it's crazy that, like you say, he doesn't admit to a lot of it, but yeah, he hasn't admitted to that in there.
Yeah, no, he's really, he always says, yeah, I took this from T-Rex or I took this from where, the beat, he always says, imagine, he always credits John Lennon, always credits Mark Bolan or whoever he nicks stuff from, but he never credits the real people. So, but I don't want to, I'm not stepping into that ring. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the mention in the book about that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, no, but it's important to credit your sources because I mentioned no names. I just read another recent Oasis, but didn't credit some of our interviews, so that was used in it. So yeah, so
What
it's
your
important.
interviews that you
Yeah, some old Liam interviews that I did, and some that Hamish did with Noel and stuff that aren't credited in another book. That I just think you should always credit your sources. So if you remember to do it, so I definitely was very grateful to read that, to watch your interview with Chris because it was really valuable actually. So and it really helped me out with that song in particular. So that's how you research this stuff is that you just have to watch and listen and read every single thing you can. Google is your friend. It's a lot easier nowadays on the internet, but it also makes it harder because there's so much out there. But yeah, Google is your friend. That's actually I think how I came across your podcast. I think was researching this book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah.
Well, with the thingy as well, this is quite an interesting link. You mentioned there the stories that somebody like me might not know, but an older generation will know.
Yeah.
That's what Noel did with the songs that he did, like take inspiration from. Because like people would go then listen to Imagine, wouldn't they? And other songs that T Rex, for example,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
might not have heard of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's what if there's a whole yeah, I mean that's one of the great things about it. I think he probably got a lot of people into Paul Weller, into the Jam. It's a gateway. You always do. I mean, the Jam did that for me. I'm that generation who grew up as Jam fans. Paul Weller being a fan of Motown, etc., opened soul music to me. Quite a lot of stuff I hadn't heard. A lot of sort of funk and stuff because he was always name checking stuff. And Noel's quite similar in his songwriting. It helps a young generation. It might be obvious to him that Imagine, everyone knows Imagine, but actually, if you're 13 and the first time you've heard um, Morning Glory album, that's when you find out a lot of stuff on there. So yeah, it's going. It's good. That's what music's about, though. Is the music you're passing down information through the ages. You're passing it down to people. You don't. There's no. I mean, nothing's original, is it? I mean, nothing in. There's only how many chords are there? 5 chords, 6 chords. There's only so much music that can possibly be original, and yeah, you're just passing it down to generation. It's a conversation with God, but you'll turn it into your own conversation with God by adding your own personality to it. But the melodies can be borrowed by all sorts of stuff. I think. I'm guessing.
Something I realised when I was reading the book, I don't know if they did it intentionally or unintentionally, but with the Beatles, they wrote songs like Yellow Submarine that a kid could sing along to or knew the melody to. And then you've got songs like Dixie's Dinner or She's Electric where the melody's kind of a kid could sing along. And a song like Little James as well.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
applied
actually a
to
really good
all
point.
ages.
Yeah, I'd not thought of that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, I mean, not, all of them. I mean, all of the stuff, and definitely maybe not. It's all really catchy, and any age can get it. Yeah, and they do the silly songs too that you can sing along to. But I mean, you can sing along to Shaker Maker pretty easily, can't you? You can sing along to live. I mean, it's all. That's probably what they took from the Beatles The most is yeah, they're universal themes that you can all join in with. It crosses generations and it crosses time. It's some sort of magic, some kind of secret source that they have. That something that was written very quickly, for example, Supersonic, something that was that song written in like, as Noel says, however long it takes five guys to eat a Chinese dinner. Um, that song still now is getting 14-year-old kids excited 30 years later for the first time, the way that we were all excited the first time we heard it. It's some sort of magic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy how
Yeah,
it's like unexplainable, isn't it? How
I know. I mean, and maybe maybe trying to explain it too much demystifies it.
there's not many bands that have had B sides like Oasis, is there?
No, no, they're very good at they were very good at B-sides. I think they maybe ran out of steam a little bit later, but that first, I mean, they were sort of throwing them away willy-nilly, and they kind of ruined Be Here Now in a way because they were throwing away things like Acquiesce and stuff like just a bit like not even as the main B-side, it just yeah. So when it came down to doing the third album, this Noel who thought he was always going to be able to write song after song, hit after hit, suddenly realizes that oh, I've given away a whole load of I've given away Talk Tonight and Acquiesce and etc. Well, I've just given them away, and you can't do them again. And I think the master plan, it's just like to give away a song like the master plan as a B-side and not save it for your third album is insane, really. Um, yeah, but that is also, I think that's also something that he probably took from the Jam, something he took from Paul Weller, because in the Jam, Paul Weller wrote some amazing B-sides. You just throw them away, but I guess they weren't throwing them away because when the Jam were doing it, singles were really, really, really important in a way that perhaps um, has lessened over time. Well, obviously, it's not the same now at all. And maybe even in the 90s, it wasn't quite as important when CDs, multi-format started coming in. But in the 70s and 80s, singles were really important. Yeah, you bought the single as that's your way of communicating with a band until the album came out. So you communicated on single, you'd hear the single on the radio, and then if to make you buy it, they'd put a really good B-side on. So go buy your 7-inch single, and that was your way in. So the Jam would do great, great B sides. And in fact, a lot of bands like the Specials did it really well too, and lots of bands did good B sides in the late 70s, early 80s. And I reckon Noel just that's how he grew up in music. That was the era he grew up in music, and he probably just that's how he just thought as you do a single, you put the next best song that you've written on there. You put the A side is the one for the radio, and the B side is another great song, and that's how you lure people in. And it did work. It definitely worked. But it meant the cupboard was bare for Noel later on a little bit, and you could hear that on the third album in particular that they were yeah he'd kind of run out of material a bit perhaps.
Do you like being now?
I don't mind it. I like it. Yeah, I think it's just every song is at least 1 minute too long,
Yeah, yeah,
and everything is slightly overproduced. But I mean, I do. I mean, I like there's too many guitars on it. I mean, it's too much. There's too much. But I do love My Big Mouth. I think it's a brilliant song, and I love. Do you know what I mean? I love these songs. I even like Magic Pie. I like them. I like it all. But I just think every song goes on too long. What about you?
yeah. I do like the album, but
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, there is songs that gone a bit too long. And it is like extreme rock and roll, and it's
Yeah.
like
I mean, all around the world is really long, like too
yeah,
long,
yeah.
and then it comes back again, and even the reprise is too long. Like even that is like, how long is it? 3 minutes? Like, you don't. I mean, that should be like a reprise should be like 30 seconds. Even that goes on for the long length of a normal song. So the whole thing is just like, yeah, it's too big, But I think no, that's not breaking news to say that Noel thinks that too. I think everyone thinks that. Yeah, I do like. I mean, there's good stuff on it. Yeah. And the gigs, I loved going to see them in that era. There's not an era I have not enjoyed seeing Oasis apart from there was a bit. in about like in that the bit when people started throwing beer and piss in venues. That's the one fear I have about about the reunion tour is just that getting covered in beer again. I didn't like that when that became a thing. People
What year
just
was that, I think?
I'd say the mid noughties, early noughties. Like it like I remember going to them at Finsbury Park and there seemed to be a lot of beer and piss in which is not I don't know, it's not really my thing. It's not my scene. So I'm just worried about, and I'm going to Cardiff, and I'm going to the first one in Cardiff. I'm a little bit worried because they're anticipating tens of thousands of people turning up at tickets.
Really?
Yeah, and so I'm a little bit worried about just everyone getting too giddy, just everyone being a little bit too excited.
Are you
But
in the standing bit as well?
I don't know. I've got a press ticket, luckily, so we'll see what happens. We'll see where they throw me. But I'm just waiting to get my ticket now. But I'm going to that. I'm very excited to see them. I mean, it's going to be great.
Yeah,
But
it'll be brilliant.
are you going? Are you
No,
managed to
I
get?
didn't get a ticket for any of them.
Oh,
And
sorry about that. I'm sure they'll come back round. I'm sure there'll be enough. I'm sure this is just the first part. I don't know. There's no information I'm not giving. But I don't think this will be the only set of gigs they play in the United Kingdom.
there's rumours of Nebworth next year. I don't know how true that is.
I'm sure that's a possibility. I'm sure there'll be another European tour because they've not announced any European dates, and sometimes with that stuff, just because tax years and stuff, things get announced at different times. And let's see. I mean, it's not. They could definitely sell this all again. They could easily sell it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at least it's just. I guess they just get this lot out of the way, see what happens. But I'm sure the opportunity to see them again will present itself. Ethan, don't worry.
Yeah, I hope so. Are you going to any others or just the first one?
I'm going to Wembley as well, one of the Wembley ones. I think the 2nd or 3rd of August. Um, yeah. So, and then we'll see. You know that I've seen him a lot, so I'm very curious to see. I mean, I thought that the Liam Gallagher, many of his solo shows were as good as seeing Oasis. I mean, there was obviously it's not quite the same, but it sounded as good, and I felt that the atmosphere is in many ways better.
Really?
Um, I just found it really. I just thought that I think what Liam has done for the Oasis brand is incredible. Like he rejuvenated it. When he worked out that he could do Oasis songs, and that actually him doing Oasis songs made them Oasis songs. Like someone else singing a song that Liam Gallagher has sung on doesn't work. So he doesn't have to have written the song. When he worked out that he could just do anything off Definitely Maybe. He could do any Oasis song that he actually originally sang on, and it's an Oasis song. I think that was a key moment in reuniting people with Oasis, young and new generation. That and the film Supersonic, him doing that starts the Oasis songs solo and Supersonic coming out when it did in 2016. They both happened the same year, didn't they? So, and I think that was the key to Oasis traveling to a whole new generation. I mean, it's something just opened the door to people your age and in a way that perhaps it wasn't just music fans, it was something like everyone got into it again, you know, because you could see in the film how brilliant they were and how funny they were and the great story that was there. And then you could go and watch it like you could watch Liam Gallagher still being brilliant then, and it felt like you connect. So those gigs felt like they were connecting with all these what Noel describes as the Parker monkeys, you know, all the kids who are like 18 to 21, 22, 23. And yeah, I don't know how did I get onto that? But anyway, yeah, so that I think that is, you know, so seeing the gigs, I think that's about the gigs, is that Liam really did open the door so that it's not just a load of old farts you saw them the first time round. Because I think that's one of the things that Noel always said, wasn't it, that when he split up Oasis, like well, everyone who could have wanted to see Oasis has seen them now anyway, you know, so he didn't feel too bad about it. But now there's all these people who've seen Liam Gallagher and who've really got into Oasis subsequently. There was generation, like 2 or 3 generations since Oasis split in 2009, who have got into Oasis since then and who never saw Oasis. So that's why the demand for tickets is so high, because there's all the people who want to see them again, which is like generation, two or three, maybe four generations of people, my age group up downwards. And then you got all these new people who were born, you know, too late to see them, who now have got into them subsequently. So that's why the demand's so rabid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Do you
think. Yeah.
know what it was that got them back together?
I don't know. I don't know. No. No. I mean, I guess it's just timing. Timing's right. The offer is obviously very good. No one's going to be poor. Everyone's going to make a lot of money. Um, Time passes. Kids are much older. All their kids are older, and they're probably badgering their parents. I don't know. It's just time. The time is right. It feels like it's sort of it was going to happen at some point. There
Yeah.
was, and maybe the point was now, and let's just see how it goes. But I don't. I've not spoken to Noel since they split up. Oh, maybe I know I have actually, but not really. So can't really speak to Noel's attitude about the whole thing. I just met him like a couple of times in pubs and stuff. But Liam, I know, has definitely. I wouldn't say he's matured, but he's in a much happier place than he was in 2009. I'd
Yeah.
say, like emotionally, he's really great person to be around. I absolutely love that guy. And I imagine it's easier to work. He's easier to work because I think also because I think finding solo success, he's proven that he on his own is a viable project. And in a way, he on his own is as big as Oasis were when they split it up. I mean, he on his own now is not as big as Oasis are now, but he's as big, I think, on his own as Oasis were in 2008, 2009. Um, and that gives you a confidence, and that allows perhaps egos to align. And I just think that they're probably in a much more grown up place. And I mean, Liam's missus Debbie is very, very, very good for him. He's got very good management around him generally, actually, beyond Debbie as well. And they've got a very good team. And I think maybe it's just all sort of a good little synergy. Works well. So
Yeah.
that's probably why. It's just a lot of factors, and at the very top of the factors is an enormous dollar sign and a chance to do something. I think also dollar sign also and a chance to do this thing for the people who've never seen him before. It's really important to talk to this new generation of fans. Yeah, it's gonna be an emotional thing. I think people underestimate. I think some people in the media perhaps underestimate. I'm not people in the street, but people in the media perhaps who I've spoken to underestimate how important this is to young people to see Oasis. It's very, very important. It's as important as England winning the World Cup or something like that, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a big moment. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Supersonic documentary there. You actually watched that with Liam, didn't you? What was that like?
Uh, yeah, I watched it with Lee. Uh, well, I was doing it for Q. I was working at Q, and I've been hassling Debbie Gwyther for many years to get Liam on the cover again since BDI split, because I just felt something was there, that he was the guy, and that he was the guy still who could move the needle on sales for the magazine. And it's difficult times for print magazines. I mean, less difficult than it probably is now, but anyway. And so yeah, I just badgered Debbie for ages, and then one day she called me up out of the blue and said, "Okay, we're doing this film called Oasis documentary about early uh, Oasis up to Nebworth. Would you do an interview with him for the cover?" 100%. So we went out to the pub and did it. Just had the best afternoon of my life with Liam in the pub. He was just like I mean, I'd interviewed him quite a few times in Oasis for NME, And it's always sort of like a kind of jumpy. You never knew what's going to happen with it. Noel was brilliant. Noel was always just like sit down, pipe out. Let me tell you a story, and it would be hilarious, and it would also be newsworthy. But Liam was always like, "Am I going to get 5 minutes? Am I going to get half an hour? Is he going to smash the room up? What sort of mood is he going to be in? Is he happy, sad? You know, you never knew." Anyway, Liam was just a total. He's like so relaxed and so funny, and just we had a great afternoon. The next day, we got really pissed. And the next day, we met at this screening room in near Charlotte, no, near Good Street in London, and just sat in a cinema, just me and him watching Supersonic, like a seat apart. I don't know why they seat apart. It was one seat apart, just the two of us, and drinking our flat whites, and him just heckling Noel throughout the film. It's very, very funny. But it was. I tell you what, I also did something after that was funny. Is that I don't know how I got in. They asked me if I would host they're doing the premiere of it, and it was going to be in Manchester and also screened simultaneously to like a dozen cinemas around the country. And would I go and host afterwards in Manchester that would be screened? And I said yes. And I really don't like public speaking at all. I mean, I just, anyway, I did it. So afterwards, I just saw we what the film was on, and Liam arrived by helicopter in Manchester, which was bizarre. He wasn't there when the film started. And I was like, God, I'm not. And I didn't speak to him until the film ended. He just walked on stage, and I was interviewing him live on stage in front of all these people in the cinema, which is quite scary. But then also, he was being beamed all to these other cinemas around the country. And he just walked on stage and immediately grabbed my nuts really hard, like squeezed, and that made me jump out of my skin, you know. And Bonehead was there in the audience, and Liam spied him and invited Bonehead on stage. So then I was doing this sort of three-way interview, and also the director Matt Wycross there, who's a really nice fella, and Matt was like the straight guy, but I had like Liam like squeezing me, pinching me next to me, and Bonehead, so I didn't know what. So yeah, so that was another funny Supersonic watch along with Liam, and then they had a party afterwards. I had a party in the hotel, and as I was leaving as I was leaving the cinema, I just asked Debbie, "Where's the party?" She told me the name of the hotel. So, but don't tell anyone. She said, "Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone," because there's like 15, 20 people there, and just keep it really small because otherwise it just get besieged by tabloids. So I went, okay. So they left. The security just whooshed them out. And I was like, okay, I'll get to the hotel. So I'm walking down the escalators coming out of the cinema, and Ricky Hatton was there, the boxer with a minder, and he grabbed me as he went, "All right, mate." He went, "Where's the party?" And I'm like, I said, "I don't know." And he went, "I know you know where the party is." And I'm thinking like, all right, it's Ricky Hatton. Like, so I told Ricky Hatton where the party was. So I was a bit scared, and then I got to the party, and I told them Ricky Hatton. They kind of rolled their eyes, but it was okay though. I told Ricky Hatton, but it was, yeah, having to protect a secret from Ricky Hatton is not something I'd recommend.
Yeah. You mentioned the split in 2009. You were with them in Amsterdam not long before. What
Yeah,
was that experience like?
uh, that was brilliant actually. I mean, I went for 2 nights. They were playing 2 nights. The first night, Liam was in the mood that I described previously, of that he was extremely jumpy and like quite off with me. Um, he saw me as representing Q magazine generally, as I was Q magazine. I was just there full Q magazine. Said, "You lot you leave us shit reviews, just give me a load of shit." Anyway, but Noel was absolutely lovely and really welcoming. And they had separate dressing rooms. I think they probably still do have separate dressing rooms, but it felt very separate worlds. Like Liam was in one world and Noel was in another, and then the band were kind of between the two, like sort of kids in a divorce. Um, but then the second night, because Liam had a bad throat the first night, the second night Liam's throat was much better, and the gig was great. And just had a tremendous smash up afterwards in some Irish bar in Amsterdam. And Liam and Noel both were there, and apparently it's very, very rare for Liam and Noel to be out together. And they were, you could tell that Liam was getting on Noel's wick a bit. but they were out all night and everyone was getting smashed up, and we went home in at 6, 7 in the morning. And if you told me then they were going to split up, I probably would have believed it possible, but I wouldn't have said it. I don't think it's likely. It felt like anything could happen. If you told me they were going to have some absolute apocalyptic row of guitars getting smashed up again, I would have thought, yeah, okay, I believe that. But it didn't. It didn't also at the same time didn't seem like it was on the horizon necessarily 3 or 4 months later. But it happened. And there you go. I guess it had been brewing for a while, hadn't it? So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
came along. Yeah.
There's a part in your book that shows how big the band were in '97 when you went to interview them and you had to sign like a contract that you wouldn't speak about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Yeah, yeah, it was. It was. I couldn't write about anything I'd heard on the album, but that included the single. Do you know what I mean? Which I was going there to interview them about. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of mad paranoia because they'd been so open in 94, 95, and then once second album became so huge, new people started coming in to work for their label creation from Sony, etc., and with the management, and because there was so much money at stake, and it suddenly became a lot more heavy manners, and you went from being able to just sort of call them up to not being able to do anything at all unless you sign contracts. So yeah, I had to sign. Everyone had to sign contracts. Yeah, you had to sign contracts about all sorts of stuff. In fact, that was an era when that sort of shit started happening. It's very annoying. That people talk about Britpop or whatever. My memory of Britpop was not really the music so much, and what the bands had in common was sort of freeness. And so Britpop for me was always because I was a music journalist working for a music paper. Um, that all the bands and all the people who wrote about them were all the same age, and we often all did the same sort of things. So it was very easy. Like I was quite very friendly with Elastica, for example, and it was quite easy for me to talk to Elastica I'd see Damon Albarn and Justine out in the street. You sort of mix of people. It was very free. Everything was really open, and that was the sort of beautiful bit between '93 and 90, just like a year, maybe end of '94, um, when everything was really free. But everything really changed when money happened. Pulp, I knew Pulp. Right? You interview these bands because you're the same age as them and you hang out with them, and you end up, all becomes very open from a journalistic point of view, and that's what Britpop was. That everyone's the same age, and then so loads of money starts coming in, and suddenly new management comes down, and all the terms and conditions change, and where it changed the most was with Oasis in '97. By then, there was so much money that everything was like really heavy manners. But and then so even, but it wasn't just them. The Verve suddenly became. The Verve went from being a very, very open band to suddenly being massive rock stars, and Radiohead became really hard to deal with. So that was the end. When Britpop ended, was when it became this big business. And Britpop wasn't a style of music; it was just an era of just openness, and uh, and it definitely changed for everyone in '97 when everything became really big, and then even started putting strings on their records, and people had to sign contracts, and that was it. That was the end of the dream.
You think it started to get a bit silly then?
It just becomes very, very serious. In fact, it was very, very. What I loved about the era of between say '93 and '95 was that everything was just really good fun. Like music was fun. I mean, not the actual music itself, but everything was really open, and it was like a audience, journalists, bands were all similar sort of young age. It's a Supergrass song. All right, seemed like sort of the anthem of everyone. We were young, we were free, etc. And then everything became really serious when people started realizing how much money could be made from this thing. So it becomes a business. Yeah.
You mentioned that you worked at Q and
Yeah.
NME. How did
Yeah.
you get into music journalism?
Uh, accidentally is the, although in the back of my mind, it was always the thing I wanted to do. Um, it felt like it sort of felt as unlikely to me as playing for England, or playing for, or even playing for QPR, which is what I really wanted to do. But it just, I left school at 16 going on 17. Maybe I just turned 17 anyway. I left school with zero qualifications, one French O level. Did a load of crap menial jobs, clerical work, factory work, all sorts of stuff until I was 20, and I got a job in a record shop, which I really was happy about. I really wanted to work in a record shop. So I spent sort of 3.5 years just, bumming around. Managed to get into this record shop, um, and loved it. It was like that was like my university because I worked there for 3 years, 2 and a bit years, and a bit of traveling in between. Mainly worked in this record shop because you got in there and there was just all these records, and there's people, lots of different people working there with different tastes, and so they put different stuff on the stereo, and often it was terrible, and you couldn't work out. I couldn't understand how people who say they love music could play like It Bites or some terrible 80s bands like Then Jericho. I mean, it's just Deacon Blue. I fucking hate that group. And you'd hear this stuff, but then every now and then someone would put on Neil Young, and it's the first time you've heard Neil Young, and you're 19 going on 20, and someone's playing the first Neil Young album. You go, what the hell is this? And they say, oh, it's Neil Young, and you've never listened to Neil Young because it's a bloke called Neil. And I refuse to believe that someone called Neil would be a valuable rock star or musician I want to hear. But that shows how small-minded I was because Neil Young's brilliant. So anyway, I loved working in a record shop. It opened up all this world to me. Um, and there were hundreds of records, and you could order records in. So, in 1988, this is 1988, I was going a lot of clubbing. So you'd hear records in clubs at the weekends, hip hop or house or whatever, or go go, or tech, the very starting of some sort of kind of electronic music, and you could order them in. And also what's better is you could hear American music and order the imports in, and although they cost like £9 for a 7 inch, which is a lot of money. I know it doesn't sound very much to you, but it was a lot of money. You could still order it in and listen to it. And then on top of that, I discovered you could order these records in, but you could also steal these records. So I was stealing records, as I've discovered subsequently, everyone who worked for this record shop or this chain of record shops was stealing the records. And that's okay. You get your mate, you'd arrange on a Saturday that someone would come in, buy a 12-inch single, and you'd hand over this massive big bag of albums, or maybe 100 albums, and you divide them up, and it was whatever. So I built a quite nice record collection there. I increased my knowledge tenfold, listened working there, and then really stupidly, because the money was really bad, I started stealing from the till, and I got arrested for that. So I was assistant manager of this record shop, and I got nicked. And when you've been arrested for stealing your place of work, it's very hard to get another job, because you can't get a reference, understandably. So I learned my lesson. Don't do that, girls and boys. Don't steal money from where you work. Why would you do that? But it was before minimum wage, and the wages we were paid were below minimum what came in as minimum wage a year or two later. So that's why it was literally impossible to pay my rent. But anyway, regardless, I got arrested in the shop, handcuffed, led out, really embarrassing, quite funny. And at that stage, I was stuck. I had no idea. This was 1991, 92. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And a friend of mine said, I'm interviewing. Here's a friend of mine who was a photographer, and he worked for newspapers as a photographer, but he also did music journalism, photography on the side. He was working for a fanzine and said, would you like to come and interview this guy called Sonic Boom from Spaceman 3? And I know you like music. And I went, yeah. And in fact, I like Spaceman 3. So it's really good. I thought, I've no idea how to do this. And I proved that to be true when I went to do it. But, I went up with this guy, Oliver, up to Rugby, ran to Sonic Boom's house, Pete Kember, aka Sonic Boom, for his solo album. His first solo album since the Spaceman 3 had just split up, or then hiatus. So I can't remember what. Maybe they were just about to split up anyway, or they weren't talking to each other. I went to his house and I did one of the world's worst interviews ever. It was my first interview. So bad that the end that Pete Kemble was asking himself the questions he had to sort of go, well, what you want to ask me here is. So I did this, but then and I wrote the piece, and it came out in this magazine a few months later, and I just really loved doing it, and I just thought, oh God, I'm very bad at this, but maybe I could learn how to do it. And what was great about this fanzine, which was called Lime Lizard, actually, was that although they didn't pay you to do the work as an interviewer, they did. They did allow you to suggest who you wanted to interview. So it allowed me to just go through a load of people whose music I liked. So I did after that, I just interviewed everyone I liked. So I interviewed um, Lawrence from at that time was from Felt, about to turn into Denim, and now is known for Go Kart Mozart. But interviewed him around his flat was a great adventure. Interviewed Billy Childish when no one was interviewing Billy Childish at the time, and we've subsequently gone on to quite a lot of work together. Interviewed Marky Smith, and so you just go through all these people that you like, and I learned on the job how to write. So it gave me, and I did that for 2 or 3 years. And then just to the point where I thought, well, I'm signing on because I had to do stuff to work out to sign on between temp work so I could get my dole. Anyways, complicated. I was basically juggling the system just to stay in my flat. And I mean, I'm from a generation where you can do that stuff. I understand that nowadays it's impossible to do the kind of stuff that you could do then, where you could sign on and off and you could get jobs and cash it. Like now I know it's impossible to just live that life that produced generations of British musicians, generation of British writers, generation of creative industries, because they used social security as a kind of way of learning their craft, and that's how you could become something a rock. So that's how Noel Gallagher became Noel Gallagher. Do a bit of roadieing and then a bit of signing on. That's happy, and there's no happy Mondays with that social. There's no Stone Roses. There's none of these big cornerstone stuff without the dole that we all had, and the fact that the council would pay most of your rent. Anyway, so I used that system. I'm very grateful to get to a stage where in 1992 I'm like going, okay, I left school 7.5 years ago. I'm still basically on the dole. I'm going to have to do a course, and I thought, well, I've done all these pieces for Lime Lizard. I'll just apply to become a journalist. I'll just do a course at London College of Princeton to be a journalist, and I'll go work for the local paper, and I'll be able to actually make some money. And then just as I got into the London College of Princeton, NME got in touch with me and said, "Would you like to come and do some reviews for us?" And I was like, yeah, I definitely would like to do that. I know everything about NME. I've now trained myself in music journalism, and luckily I'd been done some stuff for a magazine called Select as well, which had sort of given me some valuable lessons about how to write reviews. So I kind of knew the basics of the craft as well. And I got in the NME in 1993 was just the perfect place for me because I don't know why it clicked so well, but it just clicked really, really well for me, and I was really happy there, and I felt really comfortable in the work, and I found a niche because I could write about dance music, and none of those other people really could there, and there's a lot of new bands as well happening, and then like that, so I was, suddenly I was very successful at NME, but it had been it took me 6 or 7 years of really fucking up a lot regularly, time after time, my life being an absolute bin fire to suddenly go, oh, right, it's all clicked. So then I got into NME, and within a year I was on the staff, and within 2 years I was featured editor. And it's just, then I raced through the magazine, and I absolutely loved. I mean, it's the happiest part of my life, I'd say, pretty much. Apart from a couple of years at Q when I was the editor, I really loved those years too, but that was a long time later. Just for the youthful bit, those first 3 years at NME are unbeatable. And I'm sure you've interviewed other NME journalists who've said the first 18 months at NME, there's no other job like that. I don't know. I haven't watched the James Brown interview you did, but I'm sure James was a big influence on me as a character. And I'm sure his first couple of years at NME after Sounds was big for it too. Because there's just something about that place, or there was in that era, where it was just great, just great. Felt like you felt like a sense of the universe, and you were.
Yeah, yeah. He
So
said
that's
it
how,
was,
yeah,
he said the same thing, like it was good at NME. Then he obviously started loaded and that.
he did a different after that. I mean, I met James Brown actually. I remember I met James Brown when I just after I started NME. Um, I was with this guy called Alan Lewis, who was like James's mentor and who helped him start. He was the editor at NME when James started there, and at this stage he was a publisher. And James was, and I was with Anna Lewis and waiting for the lift, and Anna went, oh, Ted, you should meet James. And here was James, and James says, oh yeah, I've read some of your stuff, I like it. I'm starting a magazine called Spunky. I started a magazine called Spunky. You should come and work for us. Obviously, Spunky became Loaded. I didn't go and work for them because I was very happy at NME. But yeah, that's when I first met. I met James just as he was like in the development stage in some other part of the building, starting out.
Better they changed it to loading, innit?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't admit it was called Spunky, but he definitely said it's Spunky. Because I remember thinking, there's no way I'm working for a magazine called fucking Spunky. No way. But I mean, he said it's going to be like the Beast. It's going to with you like the Beastie Boys, don't you? It's going to be like the Beastie Boys. It's going to be like that. And that's yeah.
You started out at NME doing live reviews. What was that like getting paid to go to gigs and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But it's hard to make a living doing that. It was hard to make a living because you try and do as much. You just say yes to everything. So you get try and get a couple of live views a week, try and get an album review, and then every other couple of weeks you get a feature. If and then you're working way up to getting features, which is a bit more, an interview. I mean, it's hard to make a living, but because you're young, I mean, because I was young, I just said yes to everything. You just do everything you offered, and you were just really willing to go in the office as much as you can, to the point where they're a bit like, "Why are you always in the office?" But you just go there and just be available. It's really exciting, just if someone calls you up, so can you go? And then we started doing features, it's like, can you go to America for the weekend? Like, yeah, are you able to go tomorrow to go interview, say, the Beastie Boys or whoever, Eminem, and you just go, yes, okay, I can do that. And yeah, it, it's in a world that does not exist anymore, unfortunately. But it was a great because it's a weekly magazine and there's 51 issues a year, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be written in it, and just have to be a workhorse and happy to do it. And then you get a job on it. Eventually, I got a job working as the live reviews editor. So you're the guy who commissions other people to go and do it, and then you just do that, and also do as much feature writing as possible. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a good job. Doesn't exist now, though, unfortunately. I don't think. I feel very badly for I'm sure there's a generation of very talented writers who are not being given the opportunities to write for money that my generation had, and and often a lot of people who are socially awkward, might have other issues going on as well, could actually find some sort of structured life working for the music press that just does not exist for them otherwise. Yeah, it doesn't exist in journalism definitely anymore. But that was the great thing. Music press is finding a home for a load of misshapen people to also find a shape they can fit into. Yeah,
What year did you start working at NME?
1993.
So I'm sure NME was doing great till that point, but when Britpop came along, did it just skyrocket then?
Yeah, it was doing okay at that stage. I mean, it was still, it was bumping around 100,000 copies a week or just under. I mean, the thing, Britpop's a weird one, isn't it? Because it also around Britpop, there was lots of stuff that was not very Britpop that was also doing very well. So let's say, for example, Massive Attack was big. Björk was very big. There's a lot of stuff that was in that the Beastie Boys. There's a lot of stuff that I'll keep stopping myself saying names, but before that, there was Nirvana and stuff like that. It was still going when all these bands. I was there when we did Nirvana covers, and then there was after Kurt Cobain died, there was the Foo Fighters. So there's always stuff. Beck became very big. There's lots. Britpop's a weird era for me because Britpop was just the fact that there was a lot of British artists who were the same age as their audience and the writers I said earlier, and that's kind of what it was, just people having fun. There was things that were not very Britpoppy, like a lot of dance music around then, which was the same for me. So, like for example, the Aphex Twin, who I did quite a lot with, Richard James at NME. I mean, he was as much Britpop to me, even though his music is not Britpop, because he was the same age as me, and he was as definitely his character was just as funny as Jarvis or whoever in Britpop. Or I mean, he was more interesting than many of them, to be honest with you. And so Orbital was another group who were also the same sort of age, and they're also so Britpop's a weird thing. It's just an era rather than a kind of music. But there was a lot of acts suddenly from about 93 to till 98, 97, 98, who sold a lot of music magazines. But then that thing happened that I said earlier about how things got very serious in 1997 and everything got very dark and I think a lot of that came after well, it's a bit of a leap to say this, but I think a lot things changed a lot. A with money, and B after Princess Diana died, the mood of the everything changed. Everything got very serious in the world. It seemed to me, and yeah. So and then also the groups all got a little bit older, and a bit more remote from their audience. They put bigger barriers. One thing I love about this is a slight digression. So one thing I've interviewed Billy Childers many times, and what he always says to me is that his idea about music is that he wants to make the stage as close to the audience as possible. So he likes it if he's actually on the same level almost as the audience, or maybe a tiny step, and they're right to the face. He doesn't want to play. He sees success not as being in big venues. So what happened during Britpop was at the end when it started. The further the bands got from the audience physically on stage, the worse it became for me. And I think as a media, the harder it became to deal with is that bands became more remote and they wanted that. They wanted to play bigger venues. And one of the great things about Oasis is that although they're one group who, although they get further from you, somehow they still seem quite close. But a lot of it just became further and further and further and further away from the audience. So I think that's what happened at the end of Britpop, and that's why it became a little less enjoyable. And by the end of the 90s, there was no new groups, and we weren't selling any copies, and
I was
it
going to
just
say, was that the end of, like the beginning of the end of music magazines?
yeah. Well, also because it wasn't replenishing. The new groups were not very good. It didn't replenish till the early noughties. No, the beginning and the end of the music magazines was, I mean, that was a side issue. The main is the internet. The internet, everything, magazines, newsprint, everything, music, record sales. There's the internet has, for all its many wonders, the fact we're doing this now, and it's an amazing thing. One thing is it's not good for is people getting paid for their work, and
Yeah.
so or people paying for other people's work. So when you can just throw out any old interview on the internet, and yeah, you're not going to pay for the craft of a music magazine, unfortunately.
I agree with what you say in your book as well, that we've bands nowadays and stuff, we don't get the stories behind them and the myths and stuff like that that we did back then.
Well, because of the music press not existing.
Yeah, yeah, not getting that up, even
Yeah, it
though we've got
provides
the internet.
context. It provides context. It provided all the shade to everything, and yeah, it's really important. Like, I mean, I get. I tell you what, I'm just look because I've had to move rooms because of the internet. I'm just sitting there. I've got the new Mojo here, and I was just that reminds me that. So where do they get their? Where's the future Mojo? What do they write about? So what are they going to write about the stuff that happened in the 2010s? Because there's no music press to provide all that context. So that's why they're going to constantly have the Beatles on the cover. Are they going to have the Beatles on the cover forever? So who's going to write about all the bands that have existed in the last 10 years and stuff? And it doesn't allow a band enough chance to build up a relationship with people beyond just playing. And I think that's good for some groups. Some groups aren't built for it, but it doesn't allow for personality. And I think it's a shame. But obviously, there's nothing anyone can do about it. You can't cry over spilt milk, and you can't. You just have to hope that something else builds out of it. That some other media form builds up that allows bands to create that relationship with people that, but isn't just them talking to them. It's quite nice to have professionals to write a story about it, who are not connected to the band. And yeah, I mean, I personally miss it. I grew up reading the music press. That's why I wanted to write for it. I got NME every week from when I was a teenager onwards. So yeah, I think it's something that's missing the culture. I guess you get stuff on the internet, but yeah, you need someone to build that story.
Yeah, it's like what you were saying before about Oasis. Like you enjoy every aspect of them, like
Exactly.
the behind the scenes things as well. Like it adds to the music, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that. Yeah, I mean, where, how would Oasis have been in the modern era without the music press? I mean, they were brilliant live and everything, but I mean, I mean, tho- those first couple of years with the music press, they were absolutely hilarious, and it wasn't just the music press, it was also, then they went through the monthly magazines, they were brilliant in GQ, this stuff it was text, it was all text, there was other people filtering them for other readers, and they were, without that, how would it work? I guess, I mean, Liam does do something every day on Twitter, which is absolutely brilliant. So he gets up at whatever time he gets up, some mad time, like 5:15 in the morning, and just sends out a couple of tweets. So he's actually worked out how to do without it. Because that every morning you wake up and you go, what's Liam done on Twitter? It's just like 20 minutes of tweets or X's or whatever, I don't know how you say it now. And he's like it's genius, and it's solved their whole press campaign. They won't do any interviews. There's no point in them doing interviews. It would create more problems than it would solve for them right now. But instead, what they've got is they've got Liam out there doing, like, 15 minutes of tweets, and someone will ask him if this set list is right. He goes, no, that's not right. And he'll answer a couple of important questions, and you go, okay, so right, that's not right. We'll say, how's it going in rehearsal? Oh, rehearsal's going well. They are rehearsing. And so, you kind of get the basic information that you need. And also, it'll be really, really funny. He'll say some really funny one-liners, really psychedelic Liam Gallagher stuff. So, maybe they would find a way around having no music press because they're smart fellas and they're very, very good at it.
Well, you
Yeah.
worked at Q for 16 years till 2020. Uh,
Yeah.
that obviously stopped with lockdown. What was that like? And how do you look back at years at Q?
Uh, I look back as I joined in 2004, so I'd left NME in 2002, did a couple of years freelancing. Oh, at end of 2000, no, I left in 2001 NME. So yeah, I did a couple of years of freelancing, and I was still on a contract at NME, and I did worry I'd never get another job again. And I got offered a job as reviews editor at Q. And so I look at initially thinking, thank God I got another job. But it was a very, very, very different environment to NME in that A, it was professional. When I joined, they took it very seriously, and your work had to be up to a much higher standard in terms of editing, not and writing was a different kind of standard. But yeah, the editing level was much higher, and I learned a lot there. But it wasn't much fun for the first year or so, and then it went a bit crazy in the late noughties when it sort of, for some reason, because sales was sort of going a bit like that, and rather than just accepting that that was a natural thing in this internet age, they thought was something that there was still this vast market of people out there to buy a music-based magazine, and they tried to in about 2008. I mean, the first 3 or 4 years we were fine. It's fine. It was fine. It's just a very serious, like, you had to get into work at 9:30, and there was no leeway there, and people were disciplined, and you had a morning meeting, and everything's very serious, and it was. Come on, lads! It's a rock and roll magazine. Let's not be quite so uptight. It was quite uptight, but it's okay. Treated me very well. Paid job. Can't complain. Working in a magazine. I look back now. What, lucky me. But then in 2008, they were sales slightly on the slide. They decided that they it needed a radical reinvention. It was just the start of three or four mad years. The first bit was had to be a magazine that was about more than just music. Like, so we'd have like big interviews with comedians, and it was really rad. And they did it really suddenly, and they made it look very, very different. And they did this crazy redesign. This thing called drop caps. A drop cap is like a big capital letter, and they put at the start of an article, and they put drop caps that went right across the spread of the thing, the tech of the spread of the magazine, with the text hidden underneath, and you couldn't read it. It became illegible. Really, really expensive photo shoots with like a mixture of musicians, sports stars, comedians, film stuff. It's just like, and it became a real mishmash all at once. And they lost 25% of readers pretty much in 2 months. And so that sends the whole thing into tailspin. And so 2008, 2009, tailspin, a load of people got fired. People got fired as scapegoats. Some of them managed to cling on. The editor got fired eventually, having fired a load of people. By about 2013, 2014, it all. So, I mean, these are quite long periods of time. But when I think back, it sort of whizzed by. It's sort of a constant feeling of panic working there and slight hysteria until about 2014, and then then I think they'd sort of given up. The people who published Q sort of given up on Q, would just manage its decline a bit. And we sort of bumped along for a few years. We actually bumped along from 2014 to 2016 without an editor. Now, I don't, in the history of magazines, I don't think there's ever been a thing where there was no editor. But we'd fired one editor, and then they didn't appoint an editor, and and this guy called Phil Alexander, who was the editor of Mojo, was appointed to oversee. He's a really good guy. I've got nothing against Phil. I love that guy. But he was appointed as the editor of both Mojo and sort of overseeing Q. Now, in the history of journalism, there's never been someone who's edited two, in theory, rival magazines. So we were just bumping along doing that, and I was sort of Phil made me sort of like the acting editor, like I was looking after stuff day to day, but he was the actual editor. And then eventually in 2016, they made me the editor. So and I think they could just they worked out they'd afford. Well, we'd got costs down to a level where they could afford to make someone the editor. So I was the editor, and actually we sort of stabilised. And I think so. To answer your question, what was Q like? It was absolutely batshit crazy until I was in charge, and then it was absolutely wonderful, and I loved it. And I absolutely loved being the editor of Q, and it's what I, So it was This feels like it felt like the end of a very long journey, and made me very very happy. I loved it. I think I was made official editor in 2017, just after that Liam cover, and I absolutely, I think we made a really good magazine. I mean, I would say that, but I think for those last three and a bit years, Q was getting progressively better. I mean, sales were difficult. They were difficult, but we kind of stabilized it. We worked our way to, as long as we made money, as long as the magazine was profitable, we were fine. And so we worked our way to be profitable by doing events and stuff, and selling enough copies and doing special editions, blah, blah, blah. We made money. It was all great. And then COVID happened in 2020, and literally we lost, when they closed the newsagents, we lost, I don't know, 30% of our sales, 50% of our sales. And without those sales, we weren't making money. And pretty quickly, within 3 months' time, they couldn't afford to keep us going. So, the length of the lockdown ended Q. So we did three last issues awaiting the lockdown to end, and it didn't end in time. So we had to end first. So it's quite sad. But I really feel very proud of how Q ended up, and I was very happy at the end. I thought the last 3 years were great, and the rest of it. I mean, I sort of underplay it a bit in the book of how mad that it is, because some of it I think I may have blacked out, but there's some really mad behaviour at Q. It would make a great film, to be honest with you. The I don't want to say his name because it's not. I don't. It's a bit mean, but one of the editors, the years he was there, it was just like clown car madness. Yeah. One day I'll write. Well, I wonder. I mean, I sort of detail it a bit in paper cuts, but maybe one day I'll write a script about what really went on.
Yeah, that'd be good. That
Yeah.
obviously since you're made redundant by Q, you've
Oh,
wrote paper cuts. This Oasis one, you've worked with Billy Childish. You were going to work with Kevin Rowlands.
yeah.
But what has life been like for you since
Yeah.
that?
I've got to be clear. I've got to be careful that with the Kevin Runner stuff. I want to be very clear. It's very important that I say that he wrote his biography without me. Like he's got a book coming out, and it's his own book. I mean,
Oh,
I helped
really?
very tiny little bit of editing at the end, but yeah, it's very important because I think that there's been some sort of misunderstanding. I think I wouldn't want Kevin not to get the full credit because I've read his book. I basically helped put some of the punctuation at the after he'd written it, and like when it's flat, it's really nice. We had a really nice sort of. It just had a nice couple of days, but it's 100% his book. It's just but I had worked on an earlier version which went tits up, which is in paper cuts, but and I get on very well with Kevin now. But yeah, that's his own book. But yeah, so I've written Billy Childers' biography, which came out this time last year. Just trying to make and the Oasis book was coming out on July 3rd, and paper cuts, and I'm basically just trying to make a living. I'm sort of it feels very much back to how I was when I was 20 years old and couldn't get was trying to couldn't get ahead in the music business and in the music press world, and just trying to make a living, so just writing as much as I can, and I like writing books, but maybe one day I'll have to get a job again.
Have you got
Yeah.
an online like fanzine thing as well? No.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I do that with my old colleague Niall Doherty, who used to work for Q, is one of the hardest working guys I know, and one of the nicest guys I know. There used to be three of us, but it doesn't really make economic sense to do three people. There's two of us do it, me and Niall, called the New Q. It comes out twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. Monday editions are free, and there was an interview, and Fridays are sort of there for subscribers, and there's a mixture of interviews and reviews and stuff in there, and recommendations of music. So yeah, it does quite well. We've got 10,000, more than that, 12,000 people signed up to it, and it's very enjoyable, and it enforces me. What I love about it most of all is that it forces me to remain engaged with new music because we write about new music. That's primarily what we do, because I feel that's lacking in the culture. But I was talking about the music press. I feel that there is a way of doing it online. I'm just trying to finesse it currently with New Q, but it forces me to be engaged 100% in what's coming out that week. So, and I love new music, and I think being engaged in new music does keep you a bit younger. I mean, it does keep you mentally younger, and it's good for your soul. And it's always new stuff's always what I'm most interested in hearing. I've heard the old stuff, so New Q makes me write about it and stay 100% engaged in it. So yeah,
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I'll leave a link in the description to what we spoke about, the books and the new Q and everything. So thank you for your time.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you putting up with my internet and us having to change rooms and shit like that. And I really appreciate you asked me to do this. It's lovely to talk about myself.
No, thank you. It's been great
My
speaking.
favorite subject.
And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for the mention of the book and reading the books. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for your research. Cheers.
Thank you. See
Bye.
you in a minute.
See you. Bye.
Nice one.
Cheers.
Thank you.